In front of every front door stood a passenger I had just dropped off. Welcome back to the channel. The story I'm going to share with you today was submitted via email by a longtime subscriber named Mark. This is the original account of the incident that was posted on Reddit's r/let's-not-meet board a few months ago, where it went completely viral and sent shivers down the spines of countless readers. Mark says he hasn't been able to drive at night ever since this single event. So, turn off your lights and focus on the screen. Let's step into his perspective. Have you ever driven on a highway cutting through the middle of the desert at night? Once the neon signs and the city lights of the concrete jungle completely disappear in your rearview mirror, a strange sense of isolation sets in. Except for the narrow yellow field of vision illuminated by your headlights, it feels as if the entire world has been completely erased by someone. My name is Mark, and I've been working as a dedicated late-night Uber driver on the outskirts of Las Vegas for 3 years. Yes, dealing with angry drunks who lost their money at the casino or smelly partygoers is my daily routine. So usually after 2 a.m., I strongly prefer the long-distance calls that take me out to the empty roads on the outskirts of the city, because it's quiet. That night was no different from any other. When the clock on my dashboard read 2:40 a.m., a ping rang on my phone screen. The pickup location was a run-down, abandoned gas station at the very edge of the city limits, and the destination was a place called Oasis Estates. On the desert lots outside Vegas, new identical townhouse complexes spring up daily, replicating like clones. So even though it was a name I'd never heard before, I didn't think much of it. When I arrived at the pickup location, it was terrifyingly quiet. Only the electrical buzzing of the flickering, old gas station sign hummed in the air. The passenger was standing perfectly still right on the border of the darkness, just where the streetlight barely reached. It was raining, but he wasn't using an umbrella. He was just staring intently at the ground, without even a micro-movement. As soon as he got into the back seat of the car, a very strange and unpleasant odor pierced my nose. It wasn't the damp smell of wet clothes or sweat. It was closer to the dry metallic smell of copper from inside an old electronic device, or the smell of ozone when a copier is running. "Heading to Oasis Estates, right?" I asked kindly. But he didn't answer. Stealing a glance through the rearview mirror, he was staring straight at me. No, more accurately, it felt like he was piercing right through my pupils. His eyes didn't blink even once. His facial muscles were stiff as a wax figure. I just figured he was tired or drunk, so I shifted gears and drove off. The navigation guided me onto an unpaved dirt road in the middle of the desert without a single light. After driving on the bumpy road for about 30 minutes, a strange, nerve-grating sense of alienation began to fill the car. Even though the car was shaking violently from side to side on the dirt road, the man in the back seat didn't sway at all. He maintained a grotesquely rigid posture, as if he were tightly chained to the car seat. Furthermore, there was no sound of breathing. Not hearing the regular sound of human breathing inside a closed car is far more terrifying than you might think. That was exactly when it happened. The dirt road ended abruptly, as if cut by a knife, and the tires glided onto perfectly smooth asphalt without a single sound of friction. It was nothing but pitch-black darkness just a second ago, but suddenly, endless rows of eye-achingly bright orange streetlights appeared. The navigation announced that we had entered Oasis Estates, but it did not look like a neighborhood built for humans to live in. On both sides of the 4-lane road, massive 2-story townhouses were lined up, but those hundreds of houses looked insanely identical. The paint color, the placement of the unnecessarily large windows, the fake Roman columns that looked like plastic, even the exact angle of the small trees planted in the front yards, everything was perfectly replicated. And the most bizarre part was that there was absolutely no sense of life. There were no cars parked in the driveways, no mailboxes, not even a single piece of trash rolling around on the street. When I rolled down the window slightly, an overwhelming silence that seemed to crush my eardrums flooded into the car. There was no sound of desert wind, no bugs chirping. It was as if this entire neighborhood was trapped inside a massive vacuum chamber. Normally, a new neighborhood should smell like paint or cement, but this was a perfectly odorless space, like a hospital operating room. It felt like a glitched space where someone created a single 3D model of a house and a software error copy-pasted it thousands of times. Finally, the navigation pin stopped in front of the destination, house number 404. As I stopped the car, the man in the back seat opened the door and stepped out, still without saying a single word. The door clicked shut. Gripped by an unknown, primal fear, I hastily shifted the gear into drive. My only thought was that I needed to get out of here immediately. Before pulling away, I habitually checked behind me through the rearview mirror. And my heart felt like it dropped right out from under my ribs. The man wasn't walking towards his front door. He was standing perfectly rigid directly behind my trunk, with his back to the car. His silhouette, revealed under the red glow of the brake lights, was completely different from how he looked sitting in my back seat just moments ago. His arms were abnormally elongated, hanging limply below his knees, almost reaching his ankles. The joints in his shoulders and elbows were bent in misaligned directions, as if they didn't belong to a human. Just then, keeping his shoulders perfectly still, he twisted only his neck a grotesque 180 degrees to look at me through the rearview mirror. His lips were stretched into a grotesque smile that looked ready to tear to his ears, but his eyes were still as empty as a dead fish. That was not a human. It was an unidentified entity wearing a human shell, trying desperately to mimic human behavior. Suppressing a scream, I stomped on the gas pedal so hard I thought the floorboard would break. The car shot forward with a mad roar. The bizarre man in the rearview mirror vanished into the darkness in an instant. I had to get out of this insane neighborhood and find the main road right now. I took a sharp right turn at the first intersection, tires slipping. The exact same houses, the exact same orange streetlights stretched endlessly. Left turn again, rounding the corner and turning right again. But the scenery outside the window didn't change by a single inch. The house at 404 I had just sped past appeared again. Even as I frantically turned down alleys to escape, I ended up in front of 404 once more. I was completely trapped. I had fallen into an infinitely repeating spatial loop, woven with terrifying perfection. The navigation screen, which had been frantically recalculating to find an exit, suddenly fizzled with static and completely shut off. Then, from the speakers, a chilling mechanical voice leaked out, sounding like it was forcibly trying to mimic a live human's vocal cords. "You have arrived at your destination. Welcome home." The moment I slowed down and looked out the window in despair, my heartbeat completely stopped. The hundreds of identical houses lined up for kilometers along the road. Their massive front doors started opening all at once like dominoes. And on every single threshold, standing in the darkness, was the exact same man I had just dropped off. Hundreds, no, thousands of cloned men, with their grotesque arms hanging down to their knees, all turned their heads toward me simultaneously. They didn't walk. They didn't even pretend to lift their legs or move their joints. With their soles glued to the asphalt like adhesive, they were literally gliding across the ground at immense speed towards my car. Slap, slap, slap. The sound of thousands of bare feet hitting the ground echoed from all directions. Rear view mirror, side mirrors, windshield. In all 360 degrees of vision surrounding the car, identical faces were swarming in like a tidal wave, wearing that grotesque smile. I couldn't even scream. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripped the steering wheel so hard it might break, and crushed the accelerator to the floor. Bang! With a terrifying sound of rupture, the windshield shattered to pieces, and I felt my body float into the air like I was in zero gravity. And then, the world turned to complete darkness. How much time had passed? When I opened my eyes, the hot morning sun of the Nevada desert was beating down on my bruised face. I had passed out, bleeding, buried in the deployed airbag in the driver's seat. When I stumbled, pushed open the smashed car door, and crawled out, I absolutely could not believe the sight unfolding before my eyes. The massively sprawling housing complex, the orange streetlights, and that perfect asphalt road had vanished without a single trace. My car had crashed into a massive boulder and was stuck in the middle of an empty, uncharted desert, a staggering 50 miles away from downtown Las Vegas. A few hours later, the sheriffs arrived, and my accident was written off as a simple case of drowsy driving due to extreme fatigue. Because it was obvious I'd be locked in a psych ward if I brought up the story of thousands of monsters and a replicated fake neighborhood. But I am still absolutely certain to this day. That alien perfect space definitely existed. Somewhere in the darkness that we casually speed past on the highway, there's a massive movie set hidden away, built by them to mimic the human world. And there is one final, most terrifying fact that made me quit night driving forever. On the bumper of my car towed from the accident scene, despite hitting a rock, there was an unknown black sticky liquid smeared all over it. And that exact same black liquid was also found in the shape of a clear footprint on the floor mat in my back seat. Perhaps that night, someone successfully escaped from that fake neighborhood in my car and is right now living among us, pretending to be a real person.